It was useless to knock on Frank's door when one paid him a visit. Being hard of hearing, Frank rarely heard the knock anyway. But to enter Frank's house without knocking, one risked finding Frank in one of his friskier moods, standing au natural in his kitchen making a batch of popcorn. A batch he'd generously salt, then lavishly pour a half a pound of butter, melted butter over it. Happy hour at Frank's could start as early as 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and would find him sitting on his balcony in his well-worn lazy-board chair, a Manhattan in one hand, a cigar in the other, reading glasses sliding down his nose as he read the most recent John Stanford novel, a hardcover book which lay precariously perched on his ample bare belly. With a wave of his hand, he would signal that the self-service bar was open. There was always a bottle or two of 10 high bourbon whiskey in the pantry, heavy tumbler glasses in the cupboard, glasses which often needed a quick cleaning, and a tray of ice cubes in the refrigerator. A tray his fellow Bourbon Club members would refill with large bags of ice they brought from their own homes. Puffing on his cigar and looking very much like Winston Churchill addressing the British Parliament during the war, Frank would pontificate on what he'd read the day in the LA Times, a paper he devoured daily, 2 hours every day, starting at 4 a.m. He'd passionately recount what he'd read, which from time to time included only the headlines, since that was all he could remember. But that was okay, since those of us who joined him at the 5 o'clock balcony bourbon had already heard the news anyway. Frank loved to rail against the Republicans, and sometimes he'd throw a jab at the Democrats too, regarding some action they'd taken that he disagreed with. Occasionally, our conversations turned dark as we talked about unsavory world events and the toll they were taking on people and the planet. But for Frank, there was always a silver lining. No problem, according to Frank, was too big that the ICA methods couldn't solve. If he was anything, Frank was an optimist. As I began writing novels, Frank was my go-to computer guy, designing my book covers, my editor helping me tighten up my writing, and my bookmaker helping me format my manuscripts into text ready for publication. When Frank reviewed my writings, he could be painfully blunt, surprisingly insightful, and always inspiring. Regarding his own mortality, Frank would say, "When you're dead, you're dead. Period." Perhaps he was right. But any time I hear the clinking of ice in a glass of bourbon, or I sit down at my computer and begin writing a new novel, or I read about how a community working together overcame tremendous odds, I'll think of you, Frank. For you see, I've come to realize that the word period does not mean full stop, the way we've been led to believe, but rather it signifies a pause in time, a pause before things continue.